I want to welcome our next guest, just a fascinating guy. We've been really anxious to have him on for a long, long time. He's the governor of North Dakota. He's also a presidential candidate, Governor Doug Bergen. Welcome to the program.
Great, and I'm pleased to hear it's been a long, long time because we've only been campaigning 7 weeks. So that must be the new definition of a long, long time.
Because we actually have known about you as governor for a long time.
Well, that's right, because you got a sister that lives in Fargo, North Dakota.
Indeed, and they send dispatches, and we get them. So we've known about your work for a while.
Well, we're crushing it up there. There's a lot of good news. So
yeah, there is a lot of good news, and it's much of it has come on your watch, which is why I imagine you're now in a situation where you're running for president to try to bring some of that good news to the rest of the country. And as of today, this very day, you've qualified for the first debate.
Absolutely, and we're excited because it's going to save about 4 or 5 hours a day every day for me because I don't have to answer, are you going to make the debates? over and over and over again. We just say, yes, we can, and we can talk about the future of America and how we can improve every life, how we can bring out the best of America instead of talking about some clubhouse rules.
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice, not process-based questions? You can actually talk about what you do as president?
Yeah.
Well, look, this is a big thing, and in a lot of ways, you sort of innovated your way, as you have for much of your life, through a rules process that gets you to that debate stage. And most of our listeners have heard about it, the Bergen Bucks, and what you did as a campaign to try to get the 40,000 donor threshold to where you needed to qualify to the debate.
Well, yeah, well, then we wanted to get there faster than anybody else had, and we wanted to get there with less resources than anybody else had, and we accomplished those two things. Because I think you all know there's these firms out there that say, hey, we can help you do donor acquisition. And I said, well, what's the customer acquisition cost? $100. And I was like, hey, I can stand on a street corner and sell American flags, for $1. And so that idea led to more discussion, and we ended up with the Biden, inflation relief cards, because we do need to. I mean, people are paying too much for their gas, they're paying too much for their food. Neither of those items are included in Biden's inflation number, of course.
Right.
But we said this is a way to do that, and I love the fact that some people, didn't like the fact that we had a smart hack on how to get this thing done.
Well, you went around the system. How dare you?
Well, yeah. And then, of course, the system I told the team, we're not going to say one word about this goofy rule until we're on the other side of it, till after we've passed it in record time. But it was designed to, if you've served national office, if you've been a pundit on a national cable TV, or both of those things, if you've run for president before, if you're from a big state with 20 million, all that, it advantages all those people.
Sure.
And if you're someone from a small town in a small state with really good ideas, it's basically designed to say, look, you shouldn't be here. Mm-hmm. And we just, when someone tells us you can't build a software company in North Dakota, you can't have the, the highest GDP in the nation in North Dakota. When people do that, it's like just jumping on my start button. And so that's part of what got us going.
Also, the best indicator that it was successful in a model worth replicating is it's now been replicated. Miami Mayor Francis Suarez today announced
all kinds of people try to figure
he's doing the exact same thing. So clearly, you're trailblazing in that department too.
Totally. I want to get into your background because I think, again, if for those who follow presidential races closely, still what they're reading about with you is the process and whatever the press sort of wants to do in terms of evaluating your candidacy, which on the Ruthless Variety program we think is next to worthless. Let's tell your story a little bit, because you got a fascinating one. Software developer, you end up, I'll let you tell it, but where do we start?
Well, I think you got to start in Arthur, North Dakota. This town of 300 people where I grew up, and I think the most important thing for listeners is my parents. My dad was a World War II vet. He was had a college degree from North Dakota State. Pearl Harbor happened, and he went down 15 miles down the road to Castleton and signed up for the Navy. This is the guy that had never seen the ocean. I'm not even sure he knew how to swim. But they had the 90-day wonder program, they called it, and you're through the Great Lakes Naval Station, and you're a naval officer, and all of a sudden you're a Lieutenant JG on a destroyer. The brand new destroyer comes out at Bremerton, Washington. You're in the Pacific, and doesn't see mom for 2.5 years, and a lot of people don't understand. We've seen a lot of movies about World War II. It's always in Europe, but half of the MIAs in the history of American wars from the beginning of our country, half of the 80,000 MIAs are World War II Pacific sailors never found. Because, what happened at the end of the war, with the kamikazes, he was there with his shipmates on the USS Wren at Okinawa, and 151 destroyers guarding those aircraft carriers, and they 129 of them got hit by kamikazes. But he made it all the way to Tokyo Bay. It's September 2nd, 1945. MacArthur's there on Missouri signing that. That was his 28th birthday.
Wow.
And he made it back home, and then they didn't have a place to live, and my mom said, we're not having a family if we're living on your mother's porch, which is where they were living post-war, because there was a housing shortage in America, and so they started a little late. So that's how I ended up with parents that were, might have been somebody else's grandparents, but that generation. My mom lived through the Depression. She knew how to make ends meet, and when Dad passed away when I was a freshman in high school, she went back to work as a widow with 3 kids, and so just the lessons I learned from them about commitment and community and service, they stick with you. And then every job I had growing up was working at the farm, working at the ranch, working at the grain elevator, and even when I was an undergrad at North Dakota State, I had a chimney sweeping business. Which
we were talking about that, a little chimney.
Yeah, singing was extra. People would say how much extra? I'd say double. I didn't want nobody wanted to hear me sing, and I didn't want them to hear me sing, and so nobody took me up on the double. But I was getting paid $40 to clean a chimney, and the minimum wage had just gone from $175 to $235, and if a house had 2 or 3 chimneys, $120 I could knock down.
You're rolling in it.
Oh man, when I got back to the frat house, it was, like a monthly paycheck for working for the afternoon. But I had the top hat, the tails. I had it all.
That's when Bergen Bucks was born.
Yeah. And I had a 1947 red Chevrolet pickup that I had borrowed. That was what I'd show up in when I would do the old chimney sweep business, and that was great. And then of course I took that. There was an AP story that showed a picture of me sitting on top of a chimney in 10 below zero weather, wearing the top hat and tails, and then also climbing up on this icy roof. And at the last second, I didn't know what graduate school was, really, but a guy gave me a copy of Forbes magazine that had listed MBA programs. There was a cover story about MBA programs, and I was like, this is cool. And so I applied to the top 6 schools that were in there, and I attached that article about the chimney sweep, and it turns out that either all 6 schools made admissions errors that year, or they all were just really hoping to have a chimney sweep in their class.
There was a weird affirmative action for chimney sweeps.
Exactly. So then I was in my mid-20s. I was working in Chicago, and at that time everybody was leaving North Dakota. The population was shrinking. The economy was down, and I was walking down the hall, and I walked by Adil Zainalbai's office, and Adil was a nickname Scratch. He went on to become the head of McKinsey India, and he had a Apple II computer with VisiCalc, first spreadsheet. Mm-hmm. And I'd been working all-nighters, crunching numbers with a TI calculator and a physical paper spreadsheet. And he said, hey, check this out. And he hit the button, and it recalculated like in 5 minutes.
What is this magic?
Yeah, I mean, I was like... And people always said, oh, you were such a visionary about PC software. I said, no, I got hit in the head with a 2x4, and it was hard to miss that. And so then I realized, hey, you could do a software company anywhere. I mean, the reason why people weren't building companies in North Dakota, you're too far from the customer base, transportation costs. And I'm like, there is no transportation costs. All you need is capital and talent. And I knew all these kids that had left the state to go to work for Texas Instruments, or they were working for the bunch, Burroughs, Unisys, NCR, Cray, Honeywell, or IBM, so IBM and the bunch, all these guys that left the state. And we went back, and I'd gotten a little piece of farm ground from my dad, not enough to actually farm on, but I mortgaged that, which is a complete something you never do when your grandparents have homesteaded like on the land. You do not take a loan out against it. So against all advice, mortgaged that thing, and that became the seed capital for this startup. Great Plains Software, and we got kids from over time from 200 different small towns across North Dakota.
That's amazing.
It was amazing. Especially people that knew me, they thought it was super amazing. Like, how did that happen? But
our chimney sweep looks like a rich guy.
Yeah, we built a 2,000 person company, and we had 1,200 in Fargo, 400 in rest of North America, 400 in rest of the world. We had customers in 130 countries. We were, at the time we went public, we were one of the top 5 IPOs on NASDAQ.
Amazing.
And then we joined Microsoft. They acquired us, took all 2,000 of us, and then I became a became a executive leading this new division at Microsoft called Business Solutions, reporting to Steve Ballmer, and then we had a fantastic team there of homegrown North Dakota kids and some others, and Satya Nadella, who leads Microsoft now, he was one of my direct reports the whole time I was there, and we've got other folks that were, started in small towns in North and South Dakota that have had incredible careers at the highest levels of Microsoft. Tammy Reller, Chief Marketing Officer. Dave O'Hare is, CFO of all the commercial business. I mean, just great success.
That's so cool.
Like 60 kids that, started with Great Plains and Fargo, ended up moving to Redmond and having these amazing careers. And some of them are now either, retired and helping on the campaign or taking leave of absences to help on the campaign. So we got the old band back together and.
So you've got some tech, expertise.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, technology changing every job, every company, and every industry. But the one place it hasn't touched is government. I mean, that's one of the things when Catherine and I decided to take the leap and jump into the governor's race in 2016. There was we were down 69-10 in the poll. You guys, friend Anton and some others decided to jump in when we were and I told Catherine, she was like, "Wow, I'm not sure I want to be first lady," and I said, "Don't worry, we don't have a chance." It's only 5 months to the primary, but we ran a campaign and said, "Look, we're not running, and I'll never be right here. I will never be a senator or a congressman. I'm not." Some people want to put on a jersey, red and blue, duke it out, lob bombs, great. But I'm an operating guy. All I've ever done is, build operations and executed and serve customers and
defy the odds.
Yes.
I mean, you've defied the odds all the way through your career, every step of the way, from when you were a kid through business and then winning this governor's race where you came from nowhere and you beat the inside guy who the party was all behind, and then you showed up and you won.
Yes.
Which is what makes this presidential run so exciting for so many people, because you're like, here is this guy from North Dakota who's defied the odds his entire life, and he's stepping onto the national stage. Maybe he'll do it again.
That's the plan. All right, you've read the script.
So speaking of like the whole underestimating Governor Bergen thing, a couple of weeks ago, it grinded my gears. There were a couple of journalists having a discussion, and they're like, if Bergen's so successful and he's a billionaire, why is he in North Dakota? Which I think just says the problem that has faced this country. If you've got people on these coastal elites who have earned that title completely, not understanding why someone would want to build a business in North Dakota where they're born and raised and focus on keeping the young people graduating in that community.
Yeah. I mean, I bet you took that one.
Yeah, we did. And I just wouldn't have to call you after the show. I'll clear it up now. But I mean, one of the most, misreported things is the whole billionaire thing. Because when we got acquired, those are all public documents. I own 10% of a company that got sold for $1.1 billion.
Right.
That does not make you a billionaire, but it's apparently it's a convenient for people that want to, smash at that crowd. But yeah, so we've been blessed with a tremendous amount of success. But I'd say the thing is not what we've made, but what I've made for shareholders. I mean, over 90% of that was created for other people. And then when I had a chance to be chairman of Atlassian, which was a startup from Australia, it's a $30 billion market cap company right now. And we, helped build that company. And Avalara, where I was, those guys were a Great Plains partner with a 10 by 10 booth, and they just got acquired last year for $8 billion. Success factors.
Not a lot of strikeouts in the Bergen record. I do have to ask you one question, because you mentioned Ballmer. In your list of responsibilities with Steve Ballmer, did any of it ever include getting him hyped up for the shows that they would put on for new products?
I think it's the Windows 95 launch, right?
Yeah, that's because that's stuck in my
legendary. He's like sweating a lot. He's like just amped. I think he's got a pair of New Balances on. He just looks like classic 90s dad.
How much responsibility do you bear for this?
Well, no, I would tell you, I've known actually Steve since graduate school.
Oh, wow.
And Steve is just Steve, and there's nobody can amp up Steve. Steve is there. And I mean, you see him on the sidelines of the Clippers game, and he's doing amazing. He's gonna build the best basketball stadium that's ever been conceived in the world right now. I mean, it's just amazing what he's doing. But I have a lot of admiration for Steve and what he's done. But he brought a lot of passion to the business for sure.
So you didn't have to fire him up.
No, I did not fire him up. No, and then of course I've played basketball most of my life. And Steve, there was a 6 a.m. executive basketball league, and so I'd always make sure I was in Redmond because the kids were in Fargo, and I'd make sure I was in Redmond for the 6 a.m. Wednesday game, and he'd be as fired up there as in a pickup game at the club as he are when the Clippers are in the playoffs. It hasn't changed. I mean, the same level of the same level.
I love that. All right, so by the looks of it, based on your travel, you're going to compete everywhere. It's not like a regional candidate where we've seen in the past where people are like, well, it's from the Midwest, so he's going to go to Iowa and he'll just camp out there. But you're up to 6%, virtually unknown outside of the state of North Dakota. A poll this week had you at 6% in New Hampshire. Obviously, those kind of things don't happen by accident. You've spent a lot of time there. Is that the plan? Going everywhere, talking to everybody, just doing everything? The pathway for you is everything.
Well, we have to because we're starting with the beginning and begin with the end in mind, and our whole goal is win the election in November 2024, and all of you know better than anybody I've met on the campaign trail, because all of you have got deep knowledge about how this actually works, that we could all have a sheet of paper right now and go, okay, is a Democrat or Republican going to win California and New York?
Yeah, right.
What do you think?
Yeah,
I mean,
pretty good educated guess.
2-1 registered, Democrats versus Republican. In the same way the other states, I think we all know which way where North Dakota's going.
Yeah.
And name a bunch of other bright red states. Well, then it gets down to 7 states. Mm-hmm. Within those states, we get out the county map. We all know that every rural county is going red, and we know every deep metro is going to go blue.
Yeah.
So now we're down to 20 counties. And so, the question, if you want to win the White House in 2024, how do you execute on a race where you could, win the primary, be the nominee for the Republican Party, and not have disqualified yourself from ever even having a chance of beating Joe Biden? Because the goal is to beat Joe Biden. So that's the rate. You begin with the end in mind. That's the strategy, and that's what we're executing on.
I think you might be the first candidate that went to that second step and actually articulated what all of us have been saying on our show here for months and months, which is don't disqualify yourself in the context of trying to win a primary, right?
Right.
And it seems like what you're talking about, certainly very conservative principles, and you've governed as a conservative governor, but you do have a relatable tone. And I got to imagine that's a part of your strategy as well, is it try to get out and talk to people like they talk, not like you talk on CNN or Fox Primetime or what have you.
Well, I think relatable is key, and of course we love the fact that the on-ramp is Iowa and New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The day after we announced, First Lady Catherine, who's also grew up in North Dakota, was there, and we had our first event. We didn't go to Des Moines. We went to Farley, Iowa, and we're in CJ Beat's implement dealership shop, and she kicked it off and stood in front of 100 Iowa farmers, and her opening words of our campaign were, "I love the way it smells in here." and other than laughing, we had 100 Iowa farmers that stared at her and
they were like, we fell in love.
Well, no, not yet, because they're like, what is she talking about, and the whole thing. And then she said, hey, well, my dad had a John Deere dealership, and my sisters and I grew up mowing the lawn, sweeping the floor, working in the parts department. And when we walked in here, she goes, it smelled like home.
That's awesome.
Then they fell in love with her.
Oh, man.
So,
well, listen, Governor, you've accomplished a lot of amazing things, but having met your wife, you still did manage to outkick your coverage on that deal.
Well, and I think there's actual data to prove this, because in North Dakota, there's only 2 classes for sports. There's Class A, which is the Fargos and the Bismarcks and Jamestown, where she's from, all the big schools,
those big city North
big
Dakota.
city schools, and then everybody else, all the Arthurs are all lumped into this big thing called Class B. So it's a little bit like Hoosiers. It's like the whole everybody's in the other thing, and there is, it's super rare. Maybe it's never happened, but a Class A girl never marries a Class B kid. And so this was
I wouldn't.
This is another one of those beat the odds things that we're talking about.
I wouldn't sell yourself short, Governor. You got an incredible head of hair.
That is another thing that you got.
Well, and so do all of you. I mean, was that a criteria to get on the show? Was that
it doesn't hurt. No. I got to say, you got incredible flow.
Yeah.
People have been saying,
like a hocky coach almost.
Is that the guy with the hair? Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah.
You should see it. They got flow. I mean, boys, wow, it's a
good salad.
Yeah, no, it's good stuff. But at least I got rid of the ponytail that I had for many years when I was running the software company. But you don't have to dig too far in the archives to find find real flow.
Well, yeah.
So,
It's helpful to be a little edgy in that line of business, I'm sure.
it worked.
Yeah.
But again, I would say with Catherine, the other thing that's been amazing is she's been so courageous. She is shared everywhere we go that she's been in recovery from the disease of addiction for 21 years, but she didn't talk about it when she struggled for several decades. Mightily, and then found recovery, but was the shame and stigma. You don't talk about it even when you're in recovery. But once we got elected, she just said, "I am going to be a face and voice of recovery. Too many people are suffering," and
Takes guts.
She brings it up everywhere we go, and it's surprising. I mean, this is an issue that touches Republicans, Democrats, Independents, because it doesn't discriminate across income groups or whatever. And doesn't matter whether North Dakota, Iowa, New Hampshire, wherever we go. She shares her story, and then people will come up afterwards and talk to her. And just like in New Hampshire 2 weeks ago, we were at a welding shop there, and a couple came up and said, "Hey, we lost our son." And this is not, needle under the bridge, long-term addiction. This is like, somebody buys a, $30 Percocet that they think is Percocet, and it's laced with fentanyl, and they find him dead in the bed in the morning because they thought he overslept. I mean, this is 110,000 Americans died in 2022 or overdoses. The year before under Biden, 107,000. That's a statistic that we can't comprehend. But think about 330 a day. And 330 a day is, a niece, a nephew, a son, or a daughter. And it's, we're taking mass casualties, and we got an open border. And we got a president whose part of the job description is national security. National security includes border security, and we have an open border. And again, when 70% of those deaths, as you said, are fentanyl overdoses. I mean, this is something. So we talk about that at every stop. We talk about economy, energy, and national security. But the crisis that we're having at the border, and the crisis related to addiction, and her work has led to all kinds of policy changes in North Dakota. Where, if you're a fiscal conservative, incarceration is the least effective, most expensive way to deal with addiction. If you want to, have a cheaper and better thing, then you've got to figure out a way to move upstream. And so we've been doing that, and we've had incredible success. I mean, we've got a program in North Dakota called Peer Support Specialists. We have 800 people with lived experience. That's a polite way of saying we have 800 felons that are working, counseling people, and getting paid to provide peer support. And if they help someone get a job, get a driver's license, get a job, the three biggest social determinants of health that keep you out of the criminal justice system, which, by the way, costs more per year than sending them to NDSU and treatment. I mean, it's like but anyway, if they do those three things, we pay them more. And so we've got folks, and try getting an addiction counselor in rural Western North Dakota. Try getting someone who's a psychiatrist. You can't. Turns out that all the research would show that someone who's talking to a peer support specialist every day, texting them, calling them, there for them, providing that support is equally as good as any of the multi-year degree stuff. We just got to get people out there. So we know it works. It's way more inexpensive, and it's super less expensive than incarcerating people. Hey, we do a war on drug for 40 years, and the enemy combatant is someone who's got a disease. It'd be like having, we're going to have war on diabetes. We're going to have war on cancer. It's like, no, these are diseases. Treat them that way.
Yeah. Well, this White House certainly isn't doing enough on fentanyl. Nowhere near enough. They're not doing enough on the border. And I'm just wondering, if you're sworn in as president of the United States, what are the first couple things that you tackle on day one? Is it the border? Is it fentanyl? Is it the economy? What are your priorities?
Well, across the three, there'd be things to tackle on economy, energy, and national security. But since we're on the border, I've said, hey, I'll be down to the border in the first 2 weeks. Biden didn't get there in his first 2 years. I've been down there. We've sent North Dakota National Guard down there. I understand the situation, and it's a disaster, and it's unreported. I mean, we had our troops are covering a 30-mile segment, and 30 days I went down there to visit them after they'd been there 30 days, and I said, how's it going? They said, we've apprehended 30,000 people in 30 days. I said, how's that possible, 1,000 a day? They said, well, they walk right up to us because they're told,
that's what you got to do.
No, go to the guys in camo, go to the guys in camo. I mean, it's
a hell of a message.
Yeah, and then there's, 90-mile segment they're covering, and I said, well, okay, you guys are covering this 30 and you got 30,000. What about the other 60 miles? There's nobody there. I said, where are they? They're back at headquarters processing paper, and I mean paper, not I mean, this is not like, this is not a sophisticated, IT systems. We're talking pushing paper. And then we drive by a field, right across the Rio Grande, and it's all beat down. It looks like somebody had like a, summer Western music concert in North Dakota where everybody's just parking in a field. And there's like 8 porta potties out there. And I'm asking I said, what happened there? And they said, well, they surge across 5,000 at a time because they know we can't handle it.
Jeez.
I said, well, what do you do? I mean, there's no infrastructure. There's no food. There's no water. And they said, well, we've wiped out the Walmart in town for all the bottled water, all the diapers. And I said, and out here, and there's no shelter and no cover. And they said, yeah, and there's 5 babies born here last week.
Oh my gosh. It's
So
just heartbreaking.
it is. And then I go meet with the officers in the Customs Border Patrol, and they're like, I said, where's everybody? They said, well, anybody that could take early retirement already has. And we can't hire new people, because why would you join?
Thankless. Yeah.
Why would you join a force that's part of law enforcement where an entire party in the leadership in the White House is basically defunding it or ignoring it? I mean, you wouldn't choose that as a career.
Yeah.
Or you'd say, hey, I'd like to transfer to the northern border where the people actually still come in through the border crossings. So it's just a disaster from a morale standpoint and a staffing standpoint, and then from a technology, because part of the border, it's not just a physical wall. You build a physical wall and somebody flies an ultralight over the top of it and drops 50 pounds of enough fentanyl to kill half of America. That doesn't necessarily, it stops one problem but not all of it. We have to have technology, and there's the technology to be able to do all this. We can build a secure border. I mean, we're America. We can do that. So yes, we would have to, that's one of the things you'd have to do. But I'd say from the economy, one line: innovation, not regulation. Energy, one line: start selling energy to our friends and allies. Stop buying it from our adversaries.
There you
That
go.
changes the entire equation. And those two things, economy, energy, national security, all completely interrelated.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really smart. Listen, I got to get you out of here. Your people are going to kill me, but I do have 3 questions.
There's been no murders yet.
Is that
reported
right?
By anybody from this town. So
I don't want to be the first. I certainly don't want to be the first. All right, so we ask everybody these 3 questions.
Okay.
And I'm interested to hear what you have to say. If you can plan your last meal on Earth, what would it be?
Well, bison spaghetti. When I was,
It's so North Dakota.
No, but some dads, it's like it's dad's time to cook, and you're like, and they're going to get at the grill or do whatever. I mean, that was if you asked any of my kids, he only knows how to make one meal. And it's bison spaghetti.
Maybe flop around a couple of walleye in there for an appetizer. Huh?
Sure. Yeah,
All right.
sure.
That's a pretty good answer. All right, second question. If you never got into the line of work that you did, and I don't want to use your public service because it's relatively new, you've only your second term as a governor, but you didn't do professionally what it is that you do with software development and everything else, and you just have this blue sky to look back on your life with the benefit of retrospect, and you could fill it with absolutely anything, what would it be?
Well, I would have to say that I've been fortunate enough to spend a fair chunk of my youth growing up farming, and I've been able to spend a lot of time, on a horse ranching, and there's something pretty great about that. I mean, being on the back of a horse. I think Reagan, he wasn't maybe the first, but he said, there's nothing better for the inside of a man than the outside of a horse, and there's some element to that. And last Friday night in Big Sky, Montana, I got to ride in the arena with the flag, and I've been able to do that before with. The guy that raises all the bulls for PBR is a North Dakota rancher, Chad Berger, stock contractor of the year 13 times. And you don't have professional bull riding unless you have great bulls. And those North Dakota bulls are the best in the country. So that part's, pretty special.
Yeah.
But I've had a chance. You said if I hadn't been able to do that. So I'm getting my kind of the ability to live that kind of cowboy dream, in North Dakota. But the thing that I always wanted to be when I was a kid growing up was an architect, because bad design drives me crazy and good design thrills me. And when I think about the design of software, the design of buildings, the design of government programs, part of it is there's just so much potential in great design. And when we're designing these jobs, 10 to 20% of every job in state and federal government is some mind-numbing, soul-sucking, purposeless thing that they're required to do because of some crazy regulation. And we passed 51 out of 52 red tape reduction bills. And when we did that, we made the jobs more purposeful and more effective. And that's going to help because we have baby boomers retiring. You got to get young people to decide they're going to actually come and do this stuff. We don't need all of them, and we can reduce the size of government. I think we can take down 10 to 20% of the federal employees. There's 2 million of them, and not miss a beat. We cut $1.7 billion out of a $6 billion general fund in North Dakota and never we didn't stop delivering any services. During that time. I mean, there's never been anybody that comes from an operating background that understands IT and technology and business process improvement. I mean, we say treat the taxpayers like customers. They're paying for everything, and a customer today, every citizen that's got a smartphone understands two things. They understand the Apple App Store interface, and they understand buying from Amazon. And then you could live in any one of these states or deal with the federal government. You could have been paying taxes your whole life, and then you'd say, okay, I go to an audience in any state. How many people have got a smartphone? They all raise their hand. How many people have got 50 apps? Everybody, more than 100, most people. How many of you have an app from the federal government on your phone? 0. I mean, there's 0. And it's like, no, you want to deal with the federal government? It's some giant thing. We sent letters back and forth. There's offices. I mean, we're like living in the 1980s in terms of business processes.
It's true.
And then you got a, anybody that's ever supported a local group, you give $50 to the the local arts boys and girls club, arts council, something like that. You give $50, and then some kid writes you a thank you note. And then we have people that have paid taxes in America their whole life. They don't get a thank you note.
No.
I mean,
The opposite.
We could,
Where's the rest of it?
Yeah, no, I mean, you get an audit instead of whatever. And it's like, these are people that are paying for everything. Let's thank you for creating jobs and generating
what a concept, huh? And I got to tell you, Jeff Holmes, my brother, a product of Grand Forks, North Dakota, renowned architect, is going to be very happy with this answer. That is.
And was he a Rough Rider or?
He ended up going to Cornell and stayed out east, and was one of those East Coast elitists that we talk about often on the program. But
I thought if he's from Grand Forks, he might have gone to Red River High, and they're the Rough Riders. I thought that was the.
I don't know if it was the Rough Riders actually. Now they all had they had names they had to change.
Okay.
When he was there.
Well, hey, and before you toss me out of here, I do want to say, so we're talking to Rough Riders, we are building a presidential library for Theodore Roosevelt in North Dakota.
I can't wait to see this.
And you're all invited. The grand opening, July 4th, 2026. It's been named an official USA 250 event. It's going to be incredible. And here's a guy that transformed himself and then transformed the country. His wife and his mother died on the same day in the same house on Valentine's Day of 1884, and he was destroyed. I mean, they probably today call it clinical depression. I mean, he gave his daughter to his sister and said, I gotta get out of here. I gotta go find my soul in the wilderness. And he took the train as far as it go, and the end of the line was the Badlands of North Dakota. And he's said many times, hey, if I would have never been president if not for my time in North Dakota. It was there. He transformed himself into a Westerner. He got on horseback. He developed these relationships that all became the Rough Riders. And the Rough Riders, then, of course, he wins the Medal of Honor for, charge up San Juan Hill. And then he goes on to transform our country and really reset in the early 1900s the balance between capital and labor. And he reset the balance between humanity and the environment. And he did those two things in a way that gave us the whole American century. And then we forget is the 2016 election, a lot of it is, are we going for socialism or capitalism? Yeah. And then we've got this idea about, the Green New Deal, and which is, again, a crazy bad policy for America. I mean, we can't have subsidized 500,000 EV charging stations, not be able to permit a transmission line, kill all the baseload power, so we're destabilizing the grid at the same time we need more of it than ever to charge these cars. And oh, by the way, we're going to subsidize the cars themselves, and you got to buy a battery that comes from China because 85% of the rare earth minerals come from China. So we just trade.
Sounds like he's been listening to the program.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, you're just trading OPEC for Sinopec. It'd be and then just like 2 weeks ago, you guys are paying attention. China is threatening to cut off rare earth minerals to Japan. Yeah. And that's just
imagine if you're relying upon
and I talked about my dad. We were in Japan for a trade mission because there's 126 million people living on an island that's the size of North and South Dakota, and they have no oil and gas production. And they only produce about 2/3 of their calories. So they don't have food security or energy security. And then they're meeting, North Dakota, and they're like, well, you guys produce what? I mean, we produce more oil than many OPEC nations. And we have all this food that we're exporting. And they want to have a relationship because when we were there, when we were in a meeting with one of the largest trading companies, and they were getting the tech system, and some were getting it somewhere. There was a missile being fired by North Korea at Japan, flew harmlessly over the island. Well, we were there. I've been in a lot of business meetings, including internationally. None where there's a missile coming. But they would buy all the natural gas that all the LNG that we could ship them if you could get a pipeline to the West Coast.
Well, look, it sounds like a plan to us. We are all over this. This has been a hobby horse of the program. I got to ask you this last question before.
Sure. Okay. All right.
Our view: every successful person is motivated by one of two things: the thrill of victory or the agony of defeat. And it's not that anybody doesn't like winning or that they sort of embrace losing. It's what motivates you to keep going. And you can think of it as like the glass half full optimist, self-motivated, or like the Michael Jordan figure who every celebration, every victory he's ever had, it lasts like 2 seconds.
Yep.
But like anything that anybody's done, he wears it like a backpack and uses it as motivation to get to the next. Those are the two poles on that spectrum. Where do you find yourself?
Well, this is interesting because as an entrepreneur, I described earlier about how I bet the farm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I thought when I made that bet, there was 8 PC software accounting companies. 2 weeks later, I went to Comdex. I opened up the book, and there was 64 accounting software companies, and all of them were better well-known and better funded. And it was terrifying to me. And I was like, wow, I could literally lose the farm and whatever. So, for the next 8 years was a blur where it was just working round the clock.
That's an agony defeat.
I am not going to lose the farm. I'm not whatever. And then we'd win an award, we'd win whatever, but then it was always driven to do the next thing. So I'm more in the MJ. And I did go to MJ's basketball camp as an adult.
You did?
Yeah, absolutely.
No kidding.
So it was I had my buddy and I, we practiced for 6 months against each other, getting up every morning early before work and practicing, doing whatever. And we went there in 1998. It was the year that he had just won his 6th championship. So he was there. And then he got all these top college coaches. And there was 80 guys, and they split you up into 8 teams of 10 each. And it was just an incredible experience.
That's awesome.
He had Roy Williams. My buddy had Roy Williams and Lute Olson as his coaches. My coaches were Dean Smith and John Thompson. Those are the 2 coaches I had. And Coach K was there. Everybody was there, and it was like the most intense competitive week ever of the.
So we learned something new here. So for those listeners who want to follow along, see what you're up to, perhaps help the campaign, where do they go?
DougBergen.com.
Got it.
And I'm bummed you did not ask me about what animal I would want to take down. We can't miss that, can we?
No.
Well, we certainly can. We didn't want to get you out too late, but we would love to ask you that question. This is something.
Bare hands, remember? It's
Mano a mano, bare hands. What animal do you think is
okay?
the
So does not include like a bow and arrow?
No. You just think across the animal kingdom, everything from ants to zebras. What is the biggest animal you could take face on? You could grin it down. You could do whatever you want to do.
Hey, there's strategy. I mean, you don't have to get in a fist fight with it.
Right, exactly. But I was asking about the bow because I have shot a sizable elk at 8 yards.
Wow,
with a bow.
So
that's incredible stalking ability or a death.
No, it was. I wouldn't give myself that credit. 23 yards was perfect, and then he didn't see me and started charging in my direction.
Oh wow.
Because he thought there was another bull behind me that he was going after, and I was in camo, and it's like, I'm going to get run over by this thing. They don't train you to shoot an elk in the breastplate, but that's what I had to do. It was like self-defense. But it worked. So that was good. But I think I have to say, I mean, it's because of my alma mater and because of everything that's going on in the Theodore Roosevelt National Park and because it's now the national mammal. But I got to tell you, bison. I mean, I love.
You can take that thing right down.
Yeah, well,
jump on its back.
I'd be riding it like a horse. We'd be like teammates. He'd be like, "I'm with you, man. Let's do this. We're doing this thing. Make it happen." They are so fast. We were raising bison for a while.
Yeah,
and they are, people don't understand the athleticism of a bison.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I mean, they broke every fence we had, and then they said, "Look, the problem is they can see through your fences." I'm like, "Well, we don't have enough money to build all these new fences they can't see through because then." We just have like barbed wire. We'd added a 5th wire on top of the 4th wire, so we got.
That's why you got to start riding these.
Right,
things.
but if you don't get to know what a round bale is. I mean, they weren't around when I was a kid, but these big, huge round bales. So we had a whole row of them piled up on end, so they're sitting on the. Like cylinders stacked up, and we get all the bison herded up in there, and like 6 of these young bulls looked around and they looked at those things and they jumped up like cats on the top of those bales.
You're kidding.
And over the other side.
But those aren't those like 3.5 feet tall?
Oh, they're 6 feet. They're 6 feet high. They're as tall as any of us in this room, and they jumped over the top of them. And then we're like, how are they getting on the Texas car gates that you have where the cattle can't cross? We couldn't figure out how they were getting out. Well, they were jumping over those, and those are like 12 feet. So we had to put in double car gates to do that. So they're just incredible.
But you're saying you would pacify and tame this
yes,
bison,
you would have
and then ride it.
Ride it.
I think that's the first time we've seen something like that.
Yeah.
Riding bison all the way to the White House. Governor Doug Burgum, thank you for coming in.
Thank you so much.
All right. Great to be with all of you. Thanks for having us on the show.
Stay in touch.
And I know you got relatives in North Dakota. You're all invited to North Dakota.
Yes.
And,
Love to go.
And don't wait till the grand opening of the TR Library. Come sooner.
I'd love it.
Count me
I'd
in.
love it.
Love
Thank
that.
you, sir.
All right. Thank you.